The Feast of the Epiphany, historically for centuries, in the first few centuries of the early church, was one of the two major occasions, feasts, where people were baptized. It was considered probably one of the most important moments in the church year. It was the Feast of Epiphany, and it was the Easter Vigil when people were immersed and they engaged and entered into the light of Christ that brought light into the darkness of their lives, which is a language that has been used throughout the centuries. Epiphany, as I've said over the years, means to be made manifest, to be made real, to become aware, to understand, to finally see the light. Some of us that are on our worship today gather every Wednesday morning for what we call coffee and conversation. And we asked the question this week about the word epiphany, and we have all used that in our regular English vernacular. You know, we have said, I've had an epiphany moment, to be made aware. And I asked the question, what are some of the times in your own lives where you've had these moments of epiphany where the light has turned on for you? And a number of people responded to that. Some people responded in a manner that where this moment of epiphany was immediate and instantaneous. There was a moment in their lives where they remembered distinctly where change occurred for them. The scales fell from their eyes and it changed the way they lived. Others responded in a manner where the epiphany was more gradual and that there was a growing awareness of the way things were moving for you in your own particular life and the way in which God was engaging and behaving with you in your own particular life. So epiphanies can happen in a variety of ways and places. I've had a couple of epiphanies in my life, and I have talked about the time where I really realized that I was being called to become an Anglican priest. And it was one of those moments that had happened very, very quickly for me. I, in hindsight, look back and say, yes, it probably was God tapping me on the shoulder. And that's often the way I think that God engages with us, is that he makes us think for ourselves and that we are using our rational, reasonable considerations in order to understand more clearly what it is God has in store for us. And often, in my own particular case, it's not until I look back in hindsight that I think, yes, that was an epiphany moment for me, and that God was really engaging with me in that time, changing the course of my particular life at that time then. And in the gospel reading this morning, we have the story of three wise people, wise men. We don't know really whether or not there were three. Matthew doesn't tell us, but we know there may have been three because there are three particular gifts presented to the Christ child. And these three astrologers who lived far away in a foreign land, probably somewhere in Persia, read somehow in the stars that something profound and important that was going to change them and their lives and the world, that got them to get up and to travel extraordinary distances in order to seek out what it was this sign or the symbol was for them and for the world. And they traversed into a foreign land with great risk, without knowing what it was that they might be in store for. And these three wise people followed the direction that they believed they were given, and they came to this small village, Bethlehem. Bethlehem, that was not considered of great import throughout that part of the historical world at the time. Lowly Bethlehem. And here they came and they followed the star of Bethlehem to the place where the child lay, presented these gifts of gold, frankincense, of myrrh, each of which had an important symbol to them, the gold being the material of kings. The frankincense was an offering of prayer and a sign of the connection between ourselves and God. And the last being the substance, myrrh, that is utilized when when someone has died and the body is anointed. So the symbol that this child will be sacrificed on behalf of the human family. And following their visitation to this young child in this small outpost of a town, they went somewhere no one knows. We do not know what effect this had on these three individuals. We do not know where they went or what their lives were from that point on. But we do know that when they made their way to this particular small, godforsaken village of Bethlehem, that the world in which they resided and lived was a world that was fraught with oppression and violence, led by tyrannical, authoritarian leaders that were taking advantage of individuals and decreeing things upon them that did not let them live the kind of life that they wished to live. In our reading from the book of Isaiah, that was the prophetic voice of this moment in time. Isaiah says in our beginning of the reading, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of God has risen upon you, even in spite of the darkness that shall cover the earth and the thick darkness that covered the peoples." To the midst of the darkness that they experienced in their lives by living within an oppressed society, an occupied territory, the light of God would shine. In our day today, in our day and age today, and throughout the course of human history, there have been moments of extraordinary darkness and cruelty. That the capacity, as I mentioned at Christmas time, the capacity of human beings to be hostile and cruel to one another is never ending and astonishing and terribly, terribly upsetting and frightening. And we often reflect on what it is within the darkness of the human heart, within the human soul, that causes us and forces us to behave in such manners one to the other. And yet it is the constant that continues to exist throughout the course of our histories. I'm sad to say that January 6th will not only be remembered today as the Feast of Epiphany, it will also be remembered as a day that we will all take with us throughout the course of the rest of our lives. The behavior and the events that occurred in Washington on Wednesday, January 6th, were moments where the declaration that the darkness was seemingly overcoming the light that shone for us in the birth of Christ, and where the thick darkness was residing over the peoples. What is it about us that can cause us to go to such a degree to lose sight of how we as human beings are called to be compassionate and loving and just one to the other? We can only go by the hope and the promise that we hear in this reading today, that the light that shone over the village of Bethlehem, that led the shepherds and the wise people to that place that changed their lives and the lives of human history, will continue to shine in our lives today. Or in spite of all this darkness that we are feeling and experiencing, and the misunderstandings that we carry between one another, that ultimately the light of God will prevail, has prevailed, and will continue to prevail to guide us along the path of love and justice and compassion. We must live in the light of Christ in order that we will prevail in God. Thanks be to God. Amen.